Jai Baba. There is no creature which is not destined for the supreme goal, as there is no river which is not winding its way to the sea. Meher Baba. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. We are reading God Speaks Part 5, The Plains, and we are on page number 52.
So, it is that the self-conscious human soul of the seventh plane is now fully conscious of the self as infinite and eternal, and is now also conscious of the source of energy and mind, which were nothing but the shadowy aspects of his own infinite power and infinite knowledge.
I'll just read this up. So now, after going through the entire rigmarole of evolution, reincarnation, involution, that one individualized soul has achieved realization. That means he now has the experiential knowledge of the I am God state. So it is that the self-conscious human soul, self-conscious meaning God conscious, human soul of the seventh plane is now fully conscious of the self as infinite and eternal. Infinite, nothing where that self does not exist. Eternal, always was, is, and ever will remain. Immortal. Infinite and eternal, and is now also conscious of the source of energy and mind. Originally, he used to play upon the shadowy energy and the shadowy mind. Now he knows consciously the source of the energy and mind, which were nothing but the shadowy aspects of his own infinite power and infinite knowledge.
This self-conscious human soul, which is now self-realized or God-realized, not only experiences infinite power, knowledge and bliss, but simultaneously radiates them. Sometimes, in certain cases, such self-conscious human souls also make use of this infinite power, knowledge and bliss directly and consciously for the emancipation of other souls from their impressions and their respective associations with the gross, subtle and mental forms and worlds.
So, at the time of God realization or self realization, or jumping from the sixth to the seventh plane, as we did yesterday, from ignorance to knowledge, darkness to light, duality to oneness, most souls drop their bodies immediately after God realization for the simple reason that the purpose for which the body was taken has been fructified, has served the purpose. So they drop the body. Some souls keep their bodies for a certain period of time. Some souls who are God realized are not aware or conscious of creation. That means they are not conscious of their bodies, they are not conscious of their environment, they are only conscious of the I am God state, but the body is still there. Such souls are called majubs or mazub kamil. We come to that later on between the difference between a must or an ordinary mazub and a mazub kamil. But they cannot consciously use their infinite knowledge, power and bliss because they are not even aware of creation. So on whom would they use it? Then there are some souls who, after achieving God realization, that means experiencing infinite knowledge, power and bliss, also simultaneously retaining that God consciousness, regains the consciousness of the shadowy world, which means the mental, the subtle and the gross worlds. They get the consciousness of the worlds, but they are not duty bound to help somebody, and they are in a state of salukyat, and they are called saliks. So we have the majubs, we have the saliks. And then there are some who, once again, after achieving God consciousness, God realization, I am God state, experiencing infinite knowledge, power, and bliss, also experiencing all the three worlds and all the lower six planes of consciousness, have certain duties to perform, and they consciously use their knowledge, power, and bliss to impart it on other souls. So that is what Baba is saying here. Thus, self conscious human soul, which is now self realized or God realized,
This self-consciousness,
sorry,
this self.
this self conscious human soul, which is now self realized or God realized, not only experiences infinite knowledge, power, and bliss, but simultaneously radiates them. That means he spreads them. Sometimes, in certain cases, such self conscious human souls also make use of this infinite power, knowledge, and bliss directly and consciously for the emancipation of other souls from their impressions, which mean the samskaras, and their respective associates with the gross associations with the gross, subtle, and mental forms and worlds. So, mostly the use of these powers, knowledge, and bliss is done by the perfect masters, and at times also unconsciously by the saliks.
In its travail to gain self consciousness, the individual, eternal Atma, soul, unconscious of its infinite state in Paramatma, gathered and experienced innumerable diverse impressions, and all the while associated itself with finite and ephemeral existence, unfurling the gross, subtle, and mental worlds while evolving gross consciousness of the gross world and while involving consciousness of the subtle and mental planes of the subtle and mental worlds.
So, in its travail, travail means a very arduous, long journey. In its travail to gain self consciousness, the individual, eternal Atma, soul, unconscious of its infinite state in Paramatma, gathered and experienced innumerable diverse impressions, and all the while associated itself with finite and ephemeral existences. Ephemeral would mean short period, temporary, transient, not permanent, short lived, that way. And ephemeral existences unfurling. Unfurling would mean evolving or progressing or to rolling out. Unfurling the gross, subtle, and mental worlds, because the gross, subtle, and mental worlds we are only unfolding. There is no reality or astitva in the gross, subtle, and mental world. It is only our consciousness which unfurls or unrolls or projects or produces these worlds for us. Unfurling the gross, subtle, and mental worlds while evolving gross consciousness of the gross world and while involving consciousness of the subtle and the mental planes of the subtle and the mental world. So what Baba is trying to say is, in spite of the Atma being in Paramatma all the time and in spite of it being eternal, it has to have this arduous travail, a long arduous journey of going through all the experiences and all the opposites and ups and downs in life, and after that long journey it realizes that all that was just a dream and that I alone exist.
Involution of consciousness of the Atma, soul, culminated by the grace of a perfect master, led the Atma to self-realization and its infinite state in Paramatma. There's an asterisk. 100 बार तेरा दामन हाथों मेरे आया, जब आँख खुली देखा अपना ही गिरेबा है असगर. 100 times I felt that I held your garment firmly in my hands. When I opened my eyes, I was amazed to discover it was my own garment that I was holding. I'm good. You want to take this?
No, I just.
That.
No, I'll complete this. Involution of consciousness of the Atma. We all know involution starts from the first plane of consciousness till the sixth plane. Seventh is realization. Involution of consciousness of the Atma. Again, very important to note, very, very important. There is no evolution, uh, reincarnation, involution actually for the soul. It is for the consciousness of the soul. Everything that is happening at the periphery level of the consciousness of the soul. The soul is unscathed, the soul is untouched, the soul actually is unaffected. Everything that is happening, all experiences are happening to the consciousness of the soul. So, involution of consciousness of the Atma, soul, culminated by the grace of a perfect master. Culminated means it has reached its junction, the final point in the journey, and it can only be culminated through the active help and participation of a living perfect master or the avatar who's the eternal living perfect master. One can never achieve God realization by its own effort. Never. It has never happened, and according to my understanding of Baba's literature, it will never happen. It has to be a help of a perfect master. Alright, culminated by the grace of a perfect master, led the Atma to self realization of its infinite state in Paramatma. And the asterisk says over here, I'll read the English part, 100 times I felt that I held your garment firmly in my hands. When I opened my eyes, I was amazed to discover it was my own garment that I was holding. Well, my interpretation to that would be that my interpretation, I say, is that maybe many a times we feel that, oh, we are holding on to Baba's Daman, or we have achieved, we have reached, we have come to the end of the game. But when we open our eyes doesn't mean physical eyes. Then we realize that we have a long way to go. I was holding on to my own interpretation of what is holding on to Baba's Daman rather than actually holding on to Baba's Daman. This is what I would interpret. Go ahead. Thus it is.
Thus it is that when the consciousness of the Atma gained self-consciousness and experienced infinite power, knowledge and bliss, the Atma realized that it exists eternally, that all through the travail to gain self-consciousness, the impressions, experiences and associations of the gross, subtle and mental bodies and worlds were nothing but a vacant dream, and that the identification with gross bodies, creatures and human beings and all the experiences of the three worlds and the six planes with all of their paraphernalia had their relative existences sustained and maintained as long as the consciousness of the Atma was immature. Maturity was only gained in the seventh plane with consciousness fully involved. This led the Atma to realize the self, or made the Atma fully conscious of God realization. In other words, the Atma's own infinite state in Paramatma was consciously realized. There's an asterisk. The God realized man is the Almighty plus knowledge and consciousness. He is in the perfect wakeful state. He is knowledge, knower and the known. He is love, lover and the beloved. He knows that he is in every Jeev Atma and that everyone is in him. The God realized man knows that he is the be all and the end all of existence, and that he always was and will remain the same one, infinite ocean of truth. But the ordinary man does not know whence he came and whither he will go.
Alright, I'll just read this paragraph again. Thus it is that when the consciousness of the Atma, again remember, Baba emphasizes consciousness of the Atma. When the consciousness of the Atma gained self-consciousness, capital S, always wherever there is self-consciousness, which means God consciousness, and experienced infinite power, knowledge and bliss, the Atma realized that it exists eternally. That means always was, is and ever will remain. That all through the travail, which means the arduous journey to gain self-consciousness, the impressions, experiences and associations of the gross, subtle and mental bodies and worlds were nothing but a vacant dream, an empty dream, void. It had no substance, it had no meaning. We had done earlier that the gross, subtle and the mental worlds are nothing but the shadow of the Almighty, of the Paramatma. And we have also seen that the gross, subtle and mental bodies which we have are nothing but the shadow of the individualized soul. So one shadow living and playing around in another shadow. So what could be the importance of that? It is vacant, it has nothing, it is nothing into nothing, zero multiplied by zero, dream into a dream. That's what Baba says. So here is this vacant dream, and that the identification with gross bodies, creatures and human beings, and all the experiences of the three worlds and the six planes. That means all the three worlds and the six planes are in the domain of illusion, in the domain of duality, in the domain of nothingness. With all of their paraphernalia, had their relative existences sustained and maintained as long as the consciousness of the Atma was immature. That means the consciousness of the Atma of all of us, even right up to the sixth plane of consciousness, is immature. It's not mature. Maturity was only gained in the seventh plane with consciousness fully involved. This led the Atma to realize the self, or made the Atma fully conscious of God realization. In other words, the Atma's own infinite state in Paramatma was consciously realized. Now the asterisk says, the God realized man is the Almighty plus knowledge and consciousness. See, the most important thing is that consciousness once gained is never lost. In other words, we are also in Paramatma all the time. We can never be out of Paramatma. All the time we are in Paramatma. And in the sound sleep state, as I had said earlier, we actually become one with Paramatma in the beyond state God, or Vara Ulvara state, or Paratpar Parbrahma state. But what is lacking is that at that time there is no consciousness. If we are conscious in our sound sleep state, then that is realization. So you can see a dichotomy. How can you be conscious when you are unconscious? So here what Baba is trying to say is that consciousness is there and oneness with God is there. Even in our state, the oneness is what God with is always there, but the consciousness is not there. He is in the perfect wakeful state. What we are doing just now, we think it's a wakeful state. We are awake. But Baba says this is the false awake state. In the real awake state, Baba says this is all a dream. And we all know that a dream becomes a dream only upon waking up. At the moment we are in the dream, according to Baba, according to seers, according to those who have realized, but we think this is a reality. Why? Because we are still in the dream. The moment we get to that real, perfect, wakeful state, at that time we will realize that all this wakefulness which I thought was I am awake was actually asleep or actually a dream. So Baba says he is in the perfect wakeful state. He is knowledge, he is knowledge, knower and the known. That means he is all three in one. When we attain unity, unison, oneness, um, uh, what should I say, Advaita, there is only oneness. So there is no dui. So there is no question of knowing something, like how I said yesterday, Baba asking what is infinite knowledge. So answer was that there is nothing to know. So you become one. Even in our prayers that we do for Baba, we say, and you are knowledge itself. All knowing, infinitely knowing, the knower of the past, the present, and the future. And you are knowledge itself. When you are knowledge itself, you are one. Your everything is one. The knowledge, the knower, and the known is one. He is love, lover, and the beloved. See, when we talk about love, what does it mean? It means duality. But when he has achieved God realization, then he is all in one. He is he is love, lover, and the beloved. He knows that he is in every Jiv Atma. There is a Jiv Atma and there is a Shiv Atma. So he knows that he is in everyone because he is infinite. When he is infinite, he is in everyone. He is in everything. He is eternal. He is infinite. So he knows that he is in every Jiv Atma and that everyone is in him. Because when he achieved God's realization and comes down, so to speak, with the consciousness of the world, he gets what is known as the universal mind and the universal body. So what is universal body? A body, not this gross body. The universal body is a body in which all other bodies are included, and universal mind is that mind where all the minds are in the universal mind. So he is in everyone and everyone is in him. The God realized man knows that he is the be all and end all of all existence. Be all and end all. He is the beginning, he is the middle, and he is the end. And that he always was and will remain the same one. He will not change. There is no change. It is changelessness. It is constancy. He is constantly one. Same one, infinite ocean of truth. But the ordinary man does not know whence he came. That means from where has he came? What is the source of his coming? From which place has he come? Ordinary man does not know that. And whither he will go? To what place he will go? What next will happen to him? What is the future state of his being? He does not know. But the one who has realized, he knows everything.
It is only after the final annihilation of the mind and the wearing out of the curtain of mental impressions that consciousness can function in full freedom from all impressional bindings. This means crossing the deep abyss which separates the sixth plane from the seventh plane. The seventh plane is the formless abode of the highest of the high, the most high or the infinite God, as truth can be realized only by transcending the entire realm of imagination. Only on this seventh plane does the soul fulfill the initial urge for self-knowledge by experiencing its own self as identical with the unchanging, eternal, indivisible and formless oversoul with infinite knowledge, infinite reality, truth, infinite power and infinite bliss. Now there's an asterisk for the highest of the high. The reader is referred to Fariduddin Attar's Mantik Uttair, a Sufi allegory generally known as the Conference of the Birds, for a delightful description of the journey through the plains.
All right. So I'll read the last paragraph. This here ends the chapter also. It is only after the final annihilation of the mind. We had done this yesterday. Ego is not to be annihilated. The mind is to be annihilated. And once the mind is completely annihilated, automatically the false ego transforms itself into the real ego. So it is only after the final annihilation of the mind that the wearing out of the curtain of mental impressions that consciousness can function in full freedom from all the impressional bindings. The consciousness of a gross conscious human soul is most bound mostly in jail, in a very small circumference of samskaras and impressions. And as the impressions fade away, he goes into the subtle world and the mental world. In other words, the impressions become the periphery through which the consciousness can function. It's like, it's like blinkers that is put over here, and gradually the blinkers get opened up till there are no more blinkers. And when entire impressions are eradicated or annihilated, automatically you are able to see the whole scheme of things. So your Baba says that it is only after the final annihilation of the mind and wearing out of the curtain of the mental impressions that consciousness can function in full freedom. There is no binding now from all the impressional bindings. This means crossing the deep abyss which separate the sixth plane from the seventh plane. Somewhere else I have read Baba explaining that through your own effort of whatever you may do bhakti yoga, dhyan yoga, karma yoga. It is like climbing from the ground floor of your building to the terrace, to the top. It may be 3 stories, 4 stories, or 40 stories, up to here. And now you are supposed to jump from the terrace into the sky. So you can imagine the deep valley that is there, the distance that is to be covered, and you cannot make that jump on your own accord. You need the help of a perfect master. So Baba says, this means crossing the deep abyss which separates the sixth plane from the seventh. The seventh plane is the formless abode of the highest of the high. The seventh plane is the plane of God realization. It doesn't have any form. The most high or the infinite God as truth can be realized only by transcending the entire realm of imagination. Slightest imagination, which is the last residual, the third eye, where that is also an imagination, because the Peer or the Satpurush is able to identifying himself as something other than God, separated from God. That is an imagination. So, transcending the entire realm of imagination, only on this seventh plane does the soul fulfill the initial urge for self-knowledge. Initially, who am I? Is urge for self-knowledge. By experiencing its own self as identical with the unchanging. Important thing about truth is it is constant. It is never changing, ever the same. Unchanging, eternal, always was, is, ever will remain. Indivisible, cannot be divided, cannot be separated, cannot. That means we are none others than God himself, because God cannot be divided, is indivisible. And formless over soul with infinite knowledge, infinite reality. Knowledge would mean jnana, reality is truth, that is sat, infinite power and infinite bliss. Satchit Anand we call, infinite knowledge, power and bliss. So here we end part 5, which is the planes, and now we are going to just talk about, okay, I think better we do the chart. Are you there on the chart? We there? Alright. Because now we are on page number 55, which is part 6. But before we do that, let us very briefly go through the chart. A part of it we had done earlier. You can see that the chart is divided into 4 very distinct sections. Starting from below, gross world, Sthul Jagat, includes universes, visible and invisible. All the planets, not only in our solar system, so many solar systems, the Milky Way, whatever you want to call it, the stars and everything, they all come under the gross world. Imbibing energy from subtle world through gross aspects of energy such as nuclear, solar, etc. Imbibing the aspects of the mind, of the mental world, such as desires, thoughts and emotions. So what Baba is trying to convey is, although we are circumscribed, the lower portion, gross world, we are using the energy from the subtle world, and we are using the mind from the mental world, as we did yesterday, unconsciously and indirectly. So that is the gross world. Now there is a line there in the map. I'm sure online people could be watching it. It says the first plane. That means the first plane is where the involutionary journey starts. And when will it start? When all our gross conscious samskaras have been experienced, expanded, as I use the word tappers, in reincarnation, millions of lifetimes, we have experienced everything that is to be experienced in the gross, and they have become, the gross sanskaras have become finer, they have become thinner, they have become rarefied, they have become weaker, they have become loose, and then gradually we upgrade ourselves into the first plane, which is in the subtle world. So it is the first plane. So initially, Baba says, with gross nose, eyes, ears, you experience subtle smell, sight, and music. So it's a gradual progress. Not just you sleep in the night, you are in the gross world, the next day morning you wake up in the subtle world. No, it's a gradual, you can say, transformation, where with the gross eyes and nose and ears, we are able to get some sense of the subtle sights, smells, and music, which means the ears. So that is the first plane. And then you progress further, and then there is a second plane. When you are in the second plane, you are thoroughly, completely established in the subtle world. You have no consciousness of the gross, and although you do all the gross acts, you are not bound by the gross action, because your samskaras are now subtle. So here Baba says, gains consciousness of energy. We call it urja, we call it riddhi siddhi, we call it powers. So that is what the second planar will get. Then the third plane gains greater consciousness of energy. On the right hand side you see the subtle world, that where domain of energy, and on the left hand side you see power. That means you are now gaining certain powers. And then you move forward, and then there is fully conscious of energy, full power, and threatened by overpowering aspect of mind. That is the fourth plane. The fourth plane is like a go between the third and the fifth. The fourth plane is the threshold. The fourth plane is also referred to as the dark night of the soul. The fourth planar, the person who is on the fourth plane, is called a Mahayogi. He is also called Kuber. He has absolute power in his hands. He can do anything. Yesterday we said that he can even create new life, new universes. To bring back a dead man is child's play. To life is child's play. He is on the fourth plane. He has got tremendous power, but he has no control over mind, because he has not yet gone into the mental world. So he will be assaulted by a lot of temptations to use his powers, lot of desires, lot of emotions, so many thoughts coming. I want to do this, I want to exhibit my powers, and so that is a very tricky place to be in. And that is the only place from where you can come down. In other words, your consciousness can get shattered, disintegrated totally, as we say, bhuka bhuka, and then you'll go down all the way to the stone stage, and you have to start all the way again. But it's a very rare occurrence, because the perfect masters as well as the wali and the peers, they always have a eye on such a person, and if they feel that there is a possibility of a misuse, then they try to curb it, they try to pull away his powers. They either push him down to the third, pull him to the fifth. In other words, they try to avoid such a mishap. And Baba has said that if perchance, he does something very drastic, something very stupid, which could affect the entire creation, because he has got all the powers, then the perfect masters have got the wherewithal to see to it that even though he has done something wrong, it does not affect the creation. So that means the perfect masters have that key not to have the entire creation affected by the so-called misdeed of one person. So they can stop it. So we need not worry about that. The perfect masters take care of it. All right. Then once you cross the fourth plane, there you are absolutely safe. There is no sliding back. You can't slide back now. So fifth and the sixth plane are in the domain of the mind, the mental world. And yesterday we did that if a fourth planer enters the plane, when enters the mental world, and if his focus is straight ahead, then he might even skip, like in school we used to get double promotion. He might skip the fifth plane and straight away go to the sixth plane. And then there are other areas where use of power, misuse of power, will come to that. So here it says, okay, fifth plane, conscious of the first state of the mind, which is thoughts, that is thoughts, and controls only thoughts. Controls, creates, manipulates, does everything with thoughts. So if at all this person, Vali, who is also known as the Mahapurush, comes to know that the fourth planer is doing something, he can control the fourth planer through controlling his thoughts. The beauty of it, yesterday we did that on the fourth plane he has got tremendous power to do anything. On the fifth plane he loses all its powers. He doesn't even have consciousness of the energy world, of the subtle world. So leave aside using the powers, he doesn't know that the powers are there. So that is the fifth plane, which is the first part of the mental world. And then as you progress further, fully conscious of second state of mind and master of mind of all, the creator and controller of feelings, desires and emotions. On the right hand side, mental world, domain of mind, and there's on the left hand side, no power. So on the mental world, there is no power as such. And then when you jump from the sixth to the seventh, which is again another curve, you can see that is God, infinite power, knowledge and bliss. Seventh plane experiences consciously infinite power, knowledge and bliss and consciousness of self. So that is chart number 1, where Baba talks about the gross plane, the border between the gross and the subtle plane, the border between the subtle and the mental, which is the fourth plane, the residence of the fourth plane, and then there is the mental world, and then there is God. Okay, the title says chart 1, planes and worlds. Any questions? Consciousness was whole, full, complete. We did that. But in spite of gaining the full consciousness, that fully conscious human Atma is not able to experience the I am God state, because that consciousness is laden with, is loaded with, is shrouded by, covered with the impressions of the actions of the past, which is like a legacy. It's bringing, the consciousness is full, but it is covered by gross consciousness, by gross samskaras, sorry. And as long as the gross samskaras are there, the consciousness is compelled. Here the Baba uses the word perforce. There is no other alternative but to experience those gross samskaras and wean away from those gross samskaras. I'll read the paragraph again. This is part 6, summary of state of divine consciousness. After taking human form and gaining full consciousness, that full consciousness which the Atma soul craved in order to experience Paramatma, the Atma still does not experience Paramatma, because even after attaining full consciousness as long as this consciousness remains centered in gross impression. The consciousness remains centered in gross impressions and experiences the gross world in order to wean away from the impression. The more you experience, the more you are utilizing the gross samskaras. But at the time of experiencing, if I am feeling, if I am doing anything from the platform of the separative, finite, limited, egocentric I, on one hand I am spending my samskaras, no doubt, but on the other hand, I am also accumulating fresh samskaras. And it seems like an unending circle or cycle. So here Baba says, because even after attaining full consciousness, as long as this consciousness remains centered in gross impressions, the Atma perforce, necessarily, by force, no other choice, no way out, is made conscious of the gross body and must therefore experience the gross world. Again and again I keep repeating, gross world is nothing but the shadow of the Paramatma, and the gross body is nothing but the shadow of the Atma. So that is how it goes on and on. Now the impressions are centered in the gross because the predominant impressions are gross. Once it becomes subtle, then the consciousness will be focused or centered on the subtle. Once it becomes mental, the consciousness will be focused or centered in the mental world. That means I am thoughts or I am feelings, etc. And once all the impressions are eradicated and the mind itself is annihilated, there is no binding of samskaras or impressions, and the experience would be I am God state.
Without having human form, it is impossible for the Atma to gain consciousness of subtle and mental bodies and of self. Similarly, it is impossible to gather experience of the subtle world, the mental world, and of Paramatma. For the evolution of consciousness and for the evolution of form and for the experience of the gross world, it is absolutely necessary to have gross sanskaras, impressions, and as long as there are gross impressions, the Atma has no consciousness of the subtle and mental bodies.
Well, let me repeat, let me read again. One thing is, it is absolutely important to have a gross body. To experience anything, the gross world, the subtle world, the mental world, I am God state. Without the gross body, nothing happens. Assuming that a person is on the third plane of consciousness and he dies. Dies meaning drops the physical body, right? So he experiences the state of heaven, whatever it is. And when he comes down, he has to have a gross body. Without the gross body, he cannot progress further. He cannot progress in the afterlife stage of what we call as heaven or hell. No, there is no progress in that sense. The progress is only in the gross body. So he comes with a gross body, but his consciousness is of the subtle, because he died last time when he had come. He died as a subtle, conscious human being. But this consciousness, Baba says, it unfolds gradually. It is not that at birth only he will start doing chamatkar, something like that. So he will first gradually, that he is of the subtle world, that he has access to certain energies and powers, he will come to know in a very gradual manner. So suffice to say, gross body is absolutely important. Let me read, sorry. Without having human form. See how important human form is. It is impossible for the Atma to gain consciousness of subtle and mental bodies and of self. Gross, subtle, mental, self, which means God. Okay? Without the human form, nothing of this will happen. Nothing can happen. Similarly, it is impossible to gather experiences of the subtle world, the mental world, and of Paramatma. That means gross body is required in order to have the experiences of the gross world, the subtle world, the mental world, and of Paramatma. For the evolution of consciousness, and sorry, for the evolution of consciousness, and for the evolution of form, and for the experience of the gross world, it is absolutely necessary to have gross samskaras, impressions. We have seen that when Baba talks about evolution, he speaks about evolution of consciousness. We have seen that evolution of consciousness precedes evolution of form. We have seen that the evolution of form is nothing but a byproduct in the factory of the evolution of consciousness. So consciousness moves forward and the form follows consciousness. So here Baba says, for the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of form and for the experience of the gross world, it is necessary to have gross samskaras, impressions. In other words, if I have to experience, it could be the other way around also, but I'm going by what obviously what Baba said. In order to have the experience of the gross world, there has to be gross samskaras and I have to have a gross physical form. And as long as there are gross impressions, the Atma has no consciousness of the subtle and the mental bodies. So, depending upon the preponderance of the samskaras, you are supposed to be a gross conscious human being, or a subtle conscious human being, or a mental conscious human being. If you are a gross conscious human being, you have no experience of the subtle body and the subtle world and the mental body and the mental world and of course of the self, which is Paramatma. If you are a subtle conscious human being, you have no consciousness of the gross, mental and Paramatma. If you are a mental conscious human being, you have no consciousness of gross, subtle and the Paramatma. And the moment you get into the Paramatma state, the I am God state, your consciousness is not of gross, subtle and mental, it is only I am God state. Only when such God realized persons have to so-called come down, or if it is in their destiny, as Baba says, it is all preordained at the time of the whim or the urge or the creation, then retaining the Paramatma consciousness, the I am God consciousness, they will get back the consciousness of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and the gross. But they will not know that those worlds and spheres as real. They know that this is only shadow, this is only non-reality. So even though a Paramatma conscious human being is conscious of the gross, subtle and mental world, they give no importance to it, knowing it to be only a shadow of his own being, Paramatma, in human form.
In human form, because of the evolution of full consciousness and because of the evolution of perfect form in the shape of a human being, and because of having taken full experience of the gross world, there is now no more need of gross impressions. Gross impressions can become subtle impressions can become mental impressions, and mental impressions can disappear. So, in human form, the Atma can have consciousness of the subtle and mental bodies and of Atma itself, an experience of the subtle world, mental world, and of Paramatma. But the tragedy is that immediately after gaining full consciousness in human form, the Atma does not gain consciousness of the subtle, prana, and mental, mana, bodies and self, and likewise does not experience the subtle and mental worlds and does not have experience of Paramatma. This is because gross sanskaras do not become subtle sanskaras or mental sanskaras, nor
Disappear.
or mental sanskar, nor disappear immediately after the Atma has gained full consciousness in human form. The reason for this is that the first human form made out of the last animal form, when dropped, leaves behind a legacy of impressions of the first human form, and then each following incarnated human form is made up of the last human form sanskaras. So the Atma, in spite of having full consciousness, takes a number of human forms as long as gross sanskaras exist.
All right, I'll read this again. We've done it, and it's good that we are repeating so that it gets embedded in our psyche more firmly. In human form, because of the evolution of full consciousness, evolution of full consciousness comes in the first human form. And because of the evolution of perfect form, that means the human form is the most perfect form. It is said that human being is made in the image and likeness of God, most perfect form, in the shape of a human being. And because of having taken full experience of the gross world, there is now no more need of gross impressions. Now Baba is saying that there is no, after having experienced all the impressions or the samskaras of the gross world, now there is no more need to take the gross body would be there, but the consciousness will be focused on the subtle. Baba says gross impressions can become subtle impressions. Gross, stool, thick, crude, dirty, heavy samskaras can thin out, rarefied, feeble, loosen, and become subtle sanskaras. Can become subtle impressions. Subtle impressions can become mental impressions. They are more thin or thin. And mental impressions can disappear. So, in human form, the Atma can have consciousness of the subtle and mental bodies and of Atma itself, that means self itself, an experience of the subtle world, mental world, and of the Paramatma. That means the possibility of achieving subtle experience of the subtle world, experiences of the mental world, and experiences of Paramatma is there in the human form. The possibility is there. Baba says, but the tragedy is that immediately after gaining full consciousness in the human form, the Atma does not gain consciousness of the subtle, which is Pran, and mental, which is Mana, bodies, and self, means Paramatma, and likewise does not experience the subtle and the mental world, and does not have the experience of Paramatma. Now, why is that so? This is because gross samskaras do not become subtle samskaras or mental samskaras, nor disappear immediately after the Atma has gained full consciousness in human form. Now, why is it? Baba is explaining. The reason for this is that the first human form made out of the last animal form, when dropped, leaves behind a legacy of impressions. A legacy would be a long trail inherited. You know, you have inherited so many aspects from the past, predecessor of the first human form, and then each following incarnated human form is made up of the last human form sanskaras. I'll explain in a little deeper way. So the Atma, in spite of having full consciousness, takes a number of human forms as long as gross sanskaras exist. Okay, now I'll explain. We have done this in, I think, session 3 or session 4. It's called a summary, correct. Session 3 or session 4 we had done it. I would like to repeat. Assuming, okay, be with me. The last animal form, you can call it monkey, ape, whatever, is nothing form, body. Oh, Bob, sorry. How come? Very sorry. Excuse me. sometimes. Oh, sorry. The last animal form is nothing but the consolidated mold of the last but one animal form dropped. So, in other words, the last animal form is working out or experiencing or expanding the samskaras which it had gained or gathered or accumulated or amassed in the last but one animal form. This much assuming it to be clear. Now that last animal form is dropped. That means the last animal died. Now the consciousness which was focused on the form of the last animal has nothing to focus on because the form is dropped. So the consciousness now is focused on the sanskaras which the last animal form had gathered or accumulated during its lifetime. Now those sanskaras become the mold of the first human form. In other words, the first human form is nothing but the consolidated mold or made out of the sanskaras of the last animal form dropped. So he is the first. So what Baba is trying to say is that when the Atma got the first human form, it ought to have experienced I am God state because this is the full consciousness. But no, this full consciousness of the first human form is loaded. Baba uses the word, legacy. Is loaded with the legacy of the impressions of the last animal form dropped. So now the first human form is there. So what does the first human form do? It is expanding, experiencing, spending, utilizing, enjoying, suffering the samskaras which it has brought from the last animal form. And as it is doing that all the time, it is also accumulating fresh samskaras in the first human form. And when all the samskaras of the last animal form is spent and utilized and experienced by the first human form, then the first human form is dropped. And when the first human form is dropped, the consciousness now without a form is focused on the samskaras or impressions which the first human form had gathered during its own lifetime. And now these samskaras, after the balancing act of hell or heaven, that is not, we are not going into that. And now these samskaras become the mold of the next human form, and that is how it keeps going. So now when I read this, it may be a little slightly easier to understand. What Baba says, the reason for this is that the first human form made out of the last animal form when dropped leaves behind a legacy of impressions of the first human form, and then each following incarnated human form is made up of the last human form sanskaras. Exactly what I had explained. So, the Atma, in spite of having full consciousness, takes a number of human forms as long as gross sanskaras exist. Clear? Okay. Go ahead.
Eventually, one of two things happens. The Atma's gross sanskaras may entirely disappear all of a sudden, and the Atma lose consciousness of the gross body and gain consciousness of the self, thus losing the experience of the gross world and gaining experience of Paramatma.
So in other words, one of the two things happen. The first option by Baba is saying, all of a sudden, all the gross samskaras, gross impressions are totally nullified, are totally squared off, are totally balanced off, qualitatively, quantitatively, in whichever manner. And immediately, at the moment when all the samskaras are eradicated, annihilated, balanced out, that Atma will experience the state of Paramatma.
Or the second, more likely possibility is that eventually the gross sanskaras will fade and become subtle sanskaras. Subtle sanskaras fade more and become mental sanskaras. And finally, mental sanskaras fade to such an extent that they disappear. In this case, the Atma first loses consciousness of the gross body and the experiences of the gross world and gains consciousness of the subtle body and experience of the subtle world. Then the Atma loses consciousness of the subtle body and gains consciousness of the mental body and loses experience of the subtle world and gains experience of the mental world. Finally, the Atma loses consciousness of the mental body, thereby gaining consciousness of the Atma itself and loses the experience of the mental world and gains experience of Paramatma.
So Baba said there are two ways in which it can happen. The first is, which as I said is not very often done, that all of a sudden, for whatever reason or for no reason, the gross samskaras, all the samskaras which are covering the consciousness of the soul automatically disappears for whatever reason. And that soul immediately experiences the I am God state, the state of Paramatma, realizes the self, capital S. The second alternative, which is more common, Baba says, is that it happens in a very gradual and a phased out manner. First, the gross samskaras are experienced and utilized, and the gross samskaras converts itself or transforms itself into subtle impressions or subtle samskaras. When they convert into subtle impressions, the soul loses all the experiences and consciousness of the gross, and now it has gained the experience of the subtle world and is now playing in the subtle world. And then gradually, as time passes, the subtle impressions convert itself into mental impressions. So again, gradually that soul loses all consciousness of the subtle and now gains the consciousness of the mental world, because the impressions are now mental impressions. And then moving forward, it loses all the impressions of the mental world and gains the consciousness of the Paramatma, and then experiences the I am God state. So that is, this process is most common, and that is how in a very systematic, phased manner, the impressions convert themselves from gross to subtle, from subtle to mental, and from mental to no samskaras, and experiencing the Paramatma.
After the Atma has gained self-consciousness and experiences the Paramatma, the Atma inherits one of the three states, not 2 or 4 states, but 3 states definitely. First, state A. Soon after this experience of the highest of the high, the Atma generally drops all of its shadowy bodies, gross, subtle and mental, and eternally enjoys individualized experience as a whole, the infinite power, knowledge and bliss of God without using the attributes thereof.
No, wait. So now Baba says, so particularly he says, after the Atma has gained self-consciousness, which means after the Atma has gone to the 7th plane, from duality to oneness, and experiences the Paramatma, the Atma inherits one of the 3 states. In bracket he writes, not 2 or 4, but 3 states definitely. Now what are these 3 states? That the Atma, which has now become one with Paramatma and experiences the I am God state and experiences infinite knowledge, power and bliss, what are the states that this Atma will go into? First state A. Soon after this experience of the highest of the high, which is of the Paramatma, the Atma generally drops all its shadowy bodies, gross, subtle, and mental. That is what we were talking about, that most Atmas, after gaining the experience of Paramatma, drop their bodies, not just the gross body, as when we die, we just drop the gross body. The subtle and the mental continues its journey onwards. But they drop all the three bodies, the gross, subtle, and mental bodies. What were they? They were only the shadowy aspect of his own soul. We have done that. That gross body, subtle body, mental body are nothing but the shadows of the soul. Drops all of its shadowy bodies, gross, subtle, and mental, and eternally enjoys individualized experience. It is very important to understand that that drop in the ocean, when it was a drop, it was an apparent drop because of the existence of bubble around the drop. When on the seventh plane the bubble bursts and the drop becomes one with the ocean, the experience of that drop is not I am a part of the ocean, but I am the ocean, because the ocean is indivisible. And the beauty of the whole mechanics is that this experience of I am God will be only to that individualized drop. Otherwise, the moment the very first drop, eons before, when it realized God, the entire ocean would jump and say, Eureka, I am God, Aham Brahmasmi. No, the achievement or the attainment is individualized. Now here again there's a dichotomy, that when the individuality is dropped, yes, the finite, separative, egocentric individuality is dropped, but the real ego remains. That means this is the divine individuality, spiritual individuality, where that drop soul, only that particular drop soul will experience the I am God state. I'll repeat, and eternally enjoys individualized experience as a whole, the infinite power, knowledge, and bliss of God without using the attributes thereof. That is highlighted. Without using the attributes. Why? Because that individualized soul has no body now, neither gross body, nor subtle body, nor mental body. Everything is dropped. The experience is I am God, infinite knowledge, power, and bliss.
First state B. The Atma may not drop these three bodies until some time afterwards, although it is absolutely unconscious of these bodies, except that it retains the bodies. Its state is actually the same as A.
State, first state A and first state B. The difference between the two is that in first state A, the body is dropped. In first state B, the body remains. That means all the bodies are there. But the experience is of I am God state. In my understanding, they are called majzubs. Majzubs are like how musts are. Must, we say, they are in the plains. They are intoxicated with their love for God. They have no or very partial consciousness of their surroundings and bodies. They are must. They are intoxicated in their love for God. In the same way, when on the sixth plane, they are known as Majzub-e Kamil. Majzub-e Kamil means, you can say they are God realized, but they have no consciousness of their bodies and their surroundings, but the body is still there. So the difference between first state A and first state B is, in first state A there is no body, it is dropped. In first state B, the body remains, but they are not conscious. Now I'll read the paragraph. First state B. The Atma may not drop these three bodies until some time afterwards. Although it is absolutely unconscious of these bodies, they are not aware. Except that it retains the bodies, its state is actually the same as A. Clear? Okay, go ahead.
Second state, the Atma retains the three bodies and simultaneously with self consciousness is also conscious of its three shadows, gross, subtle, and mental bodies, and at the same time experiences the infinite power, knowledge, and bliss of God. It also experiences the gross world, subtle world, and mental world as God's shadows, but it does not use the power, knowledge, and bliss of God for the other Atmas who are mental conscious, subtle conscious, and gross conscious, and so it is independent.
Now this is second state. In in the first state we saw God realization drops the body. God realization retains the body but has no consciousness of the body. The consciousness is only I am God state, infinite knowledge, power, and bliss. In state 2, second state, the Atma retaining the I am God consciousness, infinite knowledge, power, and bliss, regains the consciousness of the gross, subtle, and mental bodies, but knows that it is not a real, it is a shadow of his own Atma, and also regains the the gross, subtle, and the mental worlds, and knows that it is the shadow of Paramatma. He does not use any of these powers, and he is independent. He is very independent. Those souls, sorry, those souls are called saliks, salukyat. They are in a state of salukyat. The state 1b was mazubs, and they are in a state of mazubiyat. Now I'll read this state 2 so that we can understand. The Atma retains the three bodies, and simultaneously with self-consciousness, which means retaining I am God consciousness, is also conscious of the three shadows. Now what are the shadows? The gross, subtle, and mental bodies. We have been doing this again and again, that the gross, subtle, and mental bodies are nothing but the shadows of the soul. The gross, subtle, and mental worlds are nothing but the shadow of Paramatma. So it is also conscious of the three shadows, gross, subtle, and mental bodies, and at the same time experiences infinite power, knowledge, and bliss of God. It also experiences the gross world, subtle world, and the mental world as God's shadows. But it does not use the power, knowledge, and bliss of God for the other Atmas who are mental conscious, subtle conscious, and gross conscious. And so it is independent. So these are the different types of perfect ones. They are called saliks. Go ahead.
Third, yeah, please.
Actually, see, I understand. The question is when Hazrat Babajan kissed Meher Baba as Merwan, he went into the first state B. According to me, so far as the Avtaran or the Avatar is concerned, this is the path of the man God. Man becoming God as Mazub or Salik or Kutub. So far as the Avatar is concerned, the Avatar is always conscious, but a veil is put over him, and at the appointed time, the veil is just removed. So yes, in a sense, yes, he went through that state, in a way. But then this is an entirely different journey. It is God becoming man, and the Sadguru is man becoming God.
Third state. This is exactly like the second state, except that the Atma uses its infinite power, knowledge, and bliss in making gross conscious Atmas subtle conscious, and subtle conscious Atmas mental conscious, and mental conscious Atmas self conscious, even at one stroke, making gross conscious Atmas self conscious.
So now this is the third state where a person who has achieved self-knowledge, self-realization, God realization, experiences infinite knowledge and power, just like in state, second state, but not only experiences but also uses it in order to help people emancipate from gross consciousness to subtle consciousness, from subtle consciousness to mental consciousness, and sometimes straight from God consciousness, from mental consciousness to self consciousness, and sometimes straight from gross consciousness to self consciousness. And they are called kutubs or perfect masters or sadgurus. So now we have got a mazub, a salik, and a kutub. And Baba says the spiritual hierarchy, in the spiritual hierarchy, there are always and at all times 56 God realized souls comprising of mazubs, saliks, and kutubs. Kutubs have a fixed number, and that is 5. At any given point in time, there are always 5 perfect masters or kutubs or what is it called? Sadgurus or Sadgurus. And during the Avtaric advent, then the avatar becomes the 57th, and then he is known as the Sahib-e-Zaman. Amongst the 5 perfect masters, there is always one who heads the entire spiritual hierarchy, and he is called Kutub-e-Irshad. And Kutub-e-Irshad's place or throne was taken by Shirdi Sai Baba, and when Baba's advent took place, he took over the entire spiritual hierarchy as the Sahib-e-Zaman. So that is the way in which the spiritual hierarchy functions. Sorry, please go ahead. No, the entire spiritual hierarchy of 7,000 souls. Well, that is there in God Speaks. We'll come to that. Yeah.
7,000. Actually, of all of creation, he is Kutub-e-Irshad. He is the head of the 5 perfect masters. It's like you've got HR head. What? You've got HR. You've got marketing. You've got like all of them are the same general manager. So it's like that.
But we have a CEO.
Like that. Full development of subtle and mental bodies in human form and involution of consciousness. Only in the human form are subtle, pran, and mental, mana bodies fully developed. Therefore, even when the Atma has gross consciousness and is unconscious of prana and mana, it does work through prana and mana, not directly, but on the gross plane. So, even if the gross conscious human Atma is unconscious of prana and mana and therefore does not realize energy and mind, it can use energy through various aspects of energy, example, nuclear, and it can use mind through various aspects of mind such as thoughts, desires, and emotions.
All right. First and foremost, when we say in the first human form, the consciousness is whole and complete, it also denotes that all the 3 bodies, see, right from, you can say, stone stage or maybe with the vegetable state, the subtle and the mental bodies are being gradually developed. Gradually. They are not complete. It is only in the first human form that the consciousness is complete, and all the 3 bodies, which mean the subtle, gross of course is there, the subtle body and the mental body is also, they are both are fully developed. So here Baba says, only in the human form are subtle, pran, and mental, mana, bodies fully developed. So in the pre-human form, the the consciousness is not complete, and even the subtle and the mental bodies are not complete. Therefore, even when the Atma has gross consciousness and is unconscious of prana and mana, which mean the subtle and the mind, it does work through pran and mana, not directly but on the gross plane. We had done this earlier, that a gross conscious human being, the consciousness is focused on the gross samskaras, but it uses the energy from the subtle world and the mind of the mental world indirectly, unconsciously. Similarly, a person in the a subtle conscious human being who is on the subtle plane is using the gross, like eating, drinking, sleeping, as I said, and the mind of the mental world. Similarly, a person in the mental world will still continue to have a gross body. He will still continue to walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep, etc. But he is not conscious of how he is doing. Indirectly, unconsciously, the mental conscious human being will use the grossness of the gross world, the energy of the subtle world, indirectly, unconsciously, through the mental plane. So that again Baba is repeating, because after all this is a summary. Therefore, even that we have done, it does work through prana and mana, not directly, but on the gross plane. So even if the gross conscious human Atma is unconscious of prana and mana, and therefore does not realize energy and mind, it can use energy through various aspects of energy, for example, nuclear, and it can use mind through various aspects of mind, such as thoughts, desires, and emotions. Now, when this nuclear word kept on coming all the time, my so called intellect was saying, the moment we hear nuclear, we talk about the nuclear bomb, atom bomb or something. So I just went a little deeper, and this is my interpretation. Nowhere is it given. So what does the nuclear mean? It pertains to the nucleus of a cell. Each cell has a nucleus. So you always knew that. You should have told me, no? Nucleus of a cell. Body as a whole. We say that this is a whole body. Now, body is made up of systems such as respiratory system, cardiovascular system, endocrinal system, digestive system, urinary system, reproductive system, etc. So, body is made up of various systems. Right. Now, each system has a group of organs. If you say digestive system, you may say the gullet and the stomach and the small intestine, the large intestine, the rectum and all that. So each system has organs, having several organs. Now organs are made up of glands, and glands are made up of cells, which has a nucleus, apart from the membrane and what they call cytoplasm. So when I was thinking, Baba is continuously using nuclear, perhaps, I'm saying perhaps, this is what Baba said, that there is a nucleus in each and every cell of our body. At the final analysis, we are cellular bodies, you see. So maybe Baba is trying to say that we are using the nucleus as the energy without knowing how we are using it. That's how my interpretation would be. All right. Go ahead, Samir. Where am I?
Here.
Yeah,
In the
nucleus,
human
okay. Such as thoughts, emotion, desires. Correct, okay. In the human form.
human form, when the Atma has. But 1 minute, what is nuclear bomb? The very nucleus has got so much of power.
Exactly.
It is harnessing that.
Exactly.
And
Ba-
when you're talking as subtle, you're talking of the power which is embedded in that nucleus.
Exactly.
Bas.
I am
Bas, bas,
confessing my ignorance by saying that every time the nuclear came, it what came to me was something to do with the nuclear bomb, But I was wondering why Baba is using such a nuclear. Now I realize, I hope, I assume, I have realized that this is what Baba must be meaning. That every cell in the body is having the energy, and that is what we are using without understanding how we are using.
In the human form, when the Atma has subtle consciousness, it is unconscious of the gross, sharir.
Where are you? Okay, sorry.
And mental, mana, bodies, yet it does work through sharir and mana, not directly, but on the subtle plane. So, even if the subtle conscious human Atma is unconscious of sharir and mana, and therefore does not realize the gross and mental worlds, it can use the gross through various aspects of the gross as eating, drinking, sleeping, seeing, feeling, hearing, etc. And it can use mind through various aspects of the mind as thoughts, desires, and emotions.
So, just as a gross conscious human being will use the energy of the subtle and the mind of the mental without realizing how it is using, in the same way, Baba says, in the human form, when the Atma has subtle consciousness, it is unconscious of the gross, Sharir, and mental, Mana bodies, yet it does work through Sharir and Mana, not directly but on the subtle plane, because the consciousness is centered and focused in the subtle samskaras, and therefore he is a subtle conscious human being. But just because he is a subtle conscious human being does not mean that he does not eat, drink, sleep, talk. He does without knowing that he is doing it, because his consciousness is not in the gross, and he also thinks, he also feels, he has desires, he has emotions, not of the mental world, not realizing how he is using it unconsciously, but on the subtle plane. So, even if the subtle conscious human Atma is unconscious of Sharir and Mana, and therefore does not realize the gross and mental worlds, it can use the gross through various aspects of the gross, as eating, drinking, sleeping, seeing, feeling. Here the feeling is the feeling because it is gross, not the feeling of the mental world. Samvedna we call it. Now this is feeling, right? Feeling, hearing, etc. And it can use mind through various aspects of the mind, such as thoughts, desires, and emotions. It can use it indirectly without realizing how it is being done. Let me see the time. We still have 3 minutes. Yeah, you can.
In the human form, when the Atma has mental consciousness, it is unconscious of the gross Sharir and subtle Prana bodies, but it does work through Sharir and Pran, not directly, but on the
Same thing. Yeah.
mental plane. So, even if the mental conscious human Atma is unconscious of Sharir and Pran and therefore does not realize the gross and subtle worlds, it can use the gross through various aspects of the gross, such as eating, sleeping, seeing, feeling, hearing, etc. And it can use energy through various aspects of energy, such as nuclear,
Etc. Nuclear. That's what I
To give a simile, let us consider.
No, don't give a simile now. Okay, give us. But I think this doesn't require any explanation.
because
The man on the mental plane will use the energy of the subtle and the sharir of the gross unconsciously, not knowing how he is doing on the mental plane. Okay, give a
To
simile.
give a simile, let us consider, for instance, a gross conscious human Atma as a soul on earth, which we take as a standard.
No, I know. Don't give a simile because this is connected with what follows, and when we start from the next paragraph, it will be difficult for people to understand what we are talking about. So, in short, what? Nothing. Any questions? Any questions to ask? No one? How come you don't have a question today? We still have a minute left. Sorry?
Not today.
Okay, okay. So now Baba is in this particular chapter number 6. The chapter itself says summary of states of divine consciousness. So one might tend to feel that it is very repetitive, which it is, but the whole idea is to let the whole God speaks sink into us. You know, as Baba had said, yes.
Yes.
But the Acha, Naman is asking that, or rather informing and getting the clarification that the Atma retains its separate finite individuality till it merges with the Paramatma and becomes one with the Paramatma. Even after becoming one with the Paramatma, it retains its individuality, but not as a separative I, but as a divine I or a spiritual I or the real ego, we call it. Yes, that individuality is returned. Re- Correct, correct. Right,
Shiv.
right.
First
Baba
Shiv,
says
then
that I am the same ancient one who keep coming over and over again in different times, different forms. But that individuality, again, yes, it's the same individuality. But here the only difference is that when we as individual merge with the Paramatma, we never come back again. The prerogative and the headache, I would say,
he
is
comes.
only of that one soul, first soul, to keep coming over and over again. Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. But the most important difference is that once we merge with him, we don't come back again. There's no need to.
Because we don't
But it is his
recognize him.
responsibility as the mischievous chicken, we say, in the nothing and the everything, that he has to keep coming over and over again.
But there
Thank
is
you.
nobody. Individuality is saying, but there's no one but him. So to that extent, it's not individualized, but it's only him. Yes, yes, yes. It is my achievement.
I don't understand these things.
Yes, it is my
Anyway,
achievement.
Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Thank you, Baba. Thanks to all of you. Now we are meeting on the 26th and 28th, Tuesday and Thursday, same time, 4:30 to 6. 26th and 28th.